بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Welcome back everybody to episode 2 of Connection. I'm joined again today with Sheikh Idris, my dear friend Sheikh Idris, who, if you don't know, is an Islamic scholar. He's an imam, chaplain, counselor, the founder of Quranic Circle. I'll put a link for Quranic Circle in the show notes below if you are interested in that. But today we wanted to continue on last time's conversation. We ended on a beautiful anecdote and kind of image from the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the theme was on agency and promoting agency in his students, in his disciples, in his companions. And I wanted to have that conversation today. As a naturopathic doctor, I think it is perhaps the most important pillar of our health that we understand that the healing that we are looking to do, we are looking to prefer onto our patients and clients, has to in some way engage the self of the person. It cannot be something that we do externally to the person, whether technique, whether chemical compound or chemical drug of sort, that does not engage the actual vital force. It does not engage the life principle. It does not engage the self directly. We would say that anything that does not support and prompt and direct the vital force towards balance, which is the definition of healing and what cure would be like, is not going to be curative. It can be suppressive, it can give relief, it can be palliative in terms of giving some repose until we find someone to help support the vital force and support the physiology and moving back into equilibrium. But by definition, there is no cure. I just wanted to say this from the beginning. It is so important that we get this. I know this can be a paradigm shift for many of us. We cannot support cure. We cannot bring the being into balance if we do not support the vital force. And so the person's agency, the person's sense of self, their self-consciousness, their capacity to choose, their capacity to mobilize must be engaged. And so this is why in certain types of medicine, certain schools of medicine, especially in medical ethics, we have this idea of the paternalistic medicine, which is oftentimes what people relate to the conventional systems of, you go to the guy in the white coat and he has diplomas behind him and he pretty much goes as you list off your symptoms, and then 7 minutes later you're walking out with a script, and he is the big poobah, he is the big authority on you, he knows you better than you know yourself, he does, and that is pretty much the conventional system, at least in terms of medicine. One of the main principles of our system of medicine, which is the traditional, holistic, I always also offer Islamically informed systems of medicine, is that we want to individualize and tailor the medicine to support the person's own capacity to take care of themselves, to choose right for themselves, to be an agent actively in their lives and their relationships. This is a critical component of the medicine, and it cannot be without it. It must be there and cannot not be there for it to work. So I just wanted to put that out there, because I know that, oftentimes people, I'm not sure the same thing happens to you, CD, when people come to you and they'll say, I have anxiety and depression, what can you do for me? And maybe the subtext is, can you kind of work some magic and like fix me? I have a meeting tomorrow I'd like to be not anxious about, or not worried about, or I have this pain I'd like to be gone by midnight or by tomorrow morning. Do you have something for that? And that's not how this works. Maybe even we have this idea about spirituality. That's definitely not how that works either. And so we want to be able to bring this theme of agency front and center, and what it means to support one's sense of self so that they are fully matured, fully differentiated, fully developed, and fully capable to navigate their own lives without the need, and I say this specifically, without the need of other people. We can have uh, we can have relationships where we can rely on one another and we can ask for help. And this is what community and healthy relational dynamics should offer. But to be dependent on people for basic needs as an adult can be very catastrophic for the self and for the person's relationships, and even maybe even their ibadah.
Mm.
But I wanted just to begin with that. And just wanted to welcome Sidi Sheikh Idris back. Welcome back, Sidi. Assalamu alaikum. So, Sidi, what would you say in terms of agency and the role it plays with your work?
Um, yeah, I mean, you've touched on some really important themes there. Um, Really, I think in the work I do with the somatic work with my clients, I'm really the invitation in this work is for them to really start discovering themselves, which requires agency. You have to have a sense of self,
Mhm.
and where where you've come from and where you are and where you see yourself going, being open to where you're going in your life. And I mean, someone said it very interestingly. I had a young client, and she said to me, she had a CBT therapist, and she had me as a somatic experiencing therapist. And she said the CBT, it was about how to change, but somatic experiencing, she said, it felt like it was how to be. Um, and
Mhm.
that in my work, I really want to inculcate a sense of being in the client. So they do have this sense of self in relationship to, and I really want to put it out there that that doesn't mean that we don't, have authorities in our life that we refer to. We're not saying that, because we need to consult, we need
Yeah.
to reach out, but at some point we need to have a reference point on ourselves. Okay, where are we going with this information that this advice we've taken from someone, this guidance we've taken from someone. Um, and so in our relationships, there has to be a sense of being in relationship to, without this sense of loss that's so common in relationships. And the hadith that really, one specific hadith, and maybe you can cite some as well that call to this, but the one that really stands out for me is where the man comes to the Prophet ﷺ, and I can't remember if we mentioned it in our last meeting conversation, was where he said, "Look, if I go to people of knowledge and they're giving me differences of opinion, and so I just don't know where I sta where to, what I'm to do." He says, "What do I do?" And he said, "Consult your heart." So we learn from that. No matter, even in um, relationship to authority, at the end you still have to make a decision in yourself in light of that, what I'm doing. And that's so, as you were speaking, I was just reflecting on how we're so deprived of that sometimes, in my experience anyway, of dealing with the community. Is that it's like when they cite that hadith, they say that, yeah, but that was specific to him because he was very not, like, he had reached a certain station.
Mhm.
And we so often dismiss these traditions like this of calling to agency. They say, yeah, but we have to be careful about this, sort of sharing these sorts of things with the community, because many people just don't understand. Many people aren't there, and always a truth to that to some degree. But it's it really concerns me where we become so overprotective of the community, like we're protecting them like children, and we
Mhm.
we have to allow them to make mistakes. We have to allow them to go out and discover, and this is what this was what it means to be a human being. That we're big boys and big girls. I often say that. I say we're big boys and big girls, and we gotta realize we're gonna make mistakes. And we come back to authority to say, "Hey, I fell on my knees and I made a mistake." and we get guidance, but in the end we can't. It's like, oh well, he said it or she said it, I've got to do it. No, you've gone and you've consulted, and now what? And even in, when you were speaking, even when you were speaking, I was reflecting on even the way today, my experience of in the Muslim world of teaching. It's very much a sense of the teacher speaks, we listen, we take notes. There's not that engagement, and we've lost that as a community. And we really need to regain that, being in relationship to our authorities, and we as authorities, allowing the community to engage, not coming down on them when they question. It's so important that we say, yeah, you've got a point there, and let's work this out together. Not feeling that because I'm seen as an authority that I have to have my stuff together and I have to know and I've got to put on this persona, because we do such a disservice to the community when we do that. And so I really think it's important that we do that, and you'll see that modeled with our in our relationships with our children. When they reach teenagers, they will question. And it's really important that we say, you know what, because they can sniff insincerity. Our youth can see this disparity between, well, you're saying this, but I'm seeing this in the community. They've still got that sort of fitri sense of like something's off.
Yes.
Whilst as we grow older, we sort of talk over that sense, and we lose that sense. And that's what they bring the youth to us. They bring that challenge, and it's like we've got to sit down with that sense. We've got that sense. We all of us have that youth within us as well, where we say, "Hang on a minute, we got to explore this, and we got to wrestle with this, and encourage that." But in a way that we want to integrate our authority or our tradition or our values, whatever you want to call them, with the reality we see in front of us. And sometimes we don't have the answers, and I think we spoke about this in our last dialogue. But at least we be real. We name the elephant in the room. That naming the elephant in the room is saying, yes, there's a mess here, and what on earth are we going to do? That's really important.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Siri. Thank you. When you mentioned something at the end there about integration, and that's the word that just popped out, because that really is at the end of it. And this is kind of the link with trauma, I think, that what happens to our sense of agency if we do have it when we're in our youth, if babies have it, maybe if teenagers still have some element of it still before they're fully initiated into modernity and into the 9 to 5 and into the bill paying and all of that craziness. They still have this rawness and this groundedness and this sense of reality. But what happens in our losing of that we need to go back and integrate it back later on. And that's what I think would maybe connect with trauma. You would agree that trauma in some way is this overwhelming experience, like we mentioned last time, that disconnects us from our heart, that disconnects us from ourself, that disconnects us from our bodies. And in that, we lose our sense of self. It's like we need to be able to be real with something to start if we're going to be in the world in a real way and be present in the real way and be an advocate of truth and reality. We have to start somewhere. We're not floating spirits here. And we will never be floating spirits. That's, even in the grave world, in Barzakh, on Qiyamah, and then in Jannah. And by the way, for those of you that want an amazing series on Jannah, Sheikh Idris has an amazing series on the garden. And he goes through, walking into the garden, all the events that precede walking into the garden, and the Prophet ﷺ, and Kawthar, and walking in, and the angels saying salam, and the dress, and the scent, and the presences, and all of that. And I never watched something that was so just uplifting. It's like we're people, you said it there, and I say it often, we're people of the garden. we're paradisial people, inshallah ta'ala.
mm,
Inshallah, Muslims, all of us are people of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, people of the garden, and we're there in bodies. We're
mm,
not they're floating spirits and just this like benign kind of ghost-like, abstraction. No, we're there with bodies. Other things are bodies. There's colors, there's sense, there's beauty, there's pleasure. We're not like Christians in that regard. We're the Christian thought, the original sin kind of allowed for that Cartesian dualism and the split from the body, where we're not like that. We're people of body. And so we want to come back to our body, and that is our sense of self.
mm,
This is our nafs. The Hakims talk about the ruh coming down into the body through the heart and perfusing throughout the entire body into different organ systems, into different centers of energy. People call them chakras or whatever. But it's really just centers of energy, a physiological, emotional texture
mm,
in the body. And it can't be without. That's what the human being is. And, we have ennobled Bani Adam, and it's the form that Allah Ta'ala made Iblis bow to before the spirit was even there. It was just the form, the body. So what is it with us that we don't have this consciousness, this awareness, this respect for, this honoring of the body? And all the things that come with it. The Prophet ﷺ was very clear in that haqqul jism, the right of the body. And so clinically here in this type of work that we're talking about, we want to come back to this. And agency is what comes when there's that integration back with the self, back with the heart, where we feel like, we have processed whatever happened to us previously that was keeping us away from our sense of self, that we couldn't say no, for example, or lay a boundary. It's like these types of things, we need to be able to make tough decisions in our lives to and it's a beautiful thing. And the first word we learn is no. This is the agency of the child. No, nah, no, I don't want it. You take it. And we so often squash that from the beginning, and that's bad. I don't want to shame here, but we have to be clear about this. That's really it could be potentially very unhealthy. It's very unhealthy because you're teaching the child to doubt or to negate or totally suppress their intuition and their sense of self and their sense of want and their capacity to express that and be safe in doing that. And alhamdulillah, I have a 2-year-old, and it's not easy knowing this, like I know this and I still get caught.
We all theoretically know this, but yeah.
No, we know this up here to help people. I'm teaching all you guys about this, and then I go upstairs. But it's real. But when there's a consciousness of it, there's an awareness of it, and even when you fall, even if you do yell or say something, you repair it.
Well, you have a reference point that you say, you come back to,
You can come back to
and repair,
That is a beautiful thing.
And even acknowledging that I'm doing this damage, that's important, like this is not right. I need to, I know I know I want, like, I know my intention's right, but I can feel that something's off. With my child, and just acknowledging that we're at some point you're at conscious incompetence, which is one of the stages of learning, and that's so just that the dangerous thing is the unconscious incompetence when you're saying, no, I need to be doing this to the child no matter what, and that's where it's really confusing. At least a child can recognize in you, say, look, daddy, when he does that, that's not right. So he at least knows he's got some clarity about this is off. Both of you've got a sense of that, the child and the parents, like, this is not working for us, is it? That's really important. And so people have to be easy on themselves. I'm very scared of perfect parents. I don't like it's us acknowledging the elephant in the room again. It's just saying, look, this is the situation. And we both have a sense in ourselves that this is not the way it can't continue like this. And maybe I don't have the answers, but at least I'm going to try to work out. But I'm not going to judge myself toxically about it either. But I know that I need to develop in this area.
That's it. Yeah. That's it. When you make everything process oriented,
yeah,
and you all of your growth in it, parenting, education, your workplace, your ibadah, everything's like in progress. This is me developing here. This is the whole point. You know, I actually was reading something the other day. It's actually a memory of mine on Facebook. I've shared it before. Maybe I'll share it again. But it was something like the child has to fall to learn how to walk. They have to fall. The child has to fall to learn that vestibular balance, to learn how to stand and using the muscle memory and the coordination, the timing, and all of that. It has to fall to learn. And it's like she was saying, in that process of moving from equilibrium to disequilibrium and back into equilibrium, that's whoa. You have to do that. You have to allow that. And you allow that for the child, and you allow that for yourself. You know, you have to give yourself a break. And when you do that, you find so much less shame, toxic shame, which is a big deal. It's a really toxic shame is so debilitating. You know.
Yeah. I really love this story. I share it quite often. I'm not sure if I shared it with you. Is that there was a young man who was an offender, and I think he was he went down for what do you call it? Where you steal cars and joyriding. We say. Do you use that term in the States?
No, joyriding is like just with your friends.
All right, joyriding in the UK is where you steal someone's car and you drive it around, and then you smash it up. So he went down for that, and then he was coming out. He was on probation, and his youth, sort of the officer that was he had to come to and assess how he's doing. One weekend he came to her, and he said to her, "You'll be really proud of me." And she said, "Why? Why do you say that?" And he went, "Well, this weekend, some of my friends said, let's go out in the town," and I knew exactly what that meant. If we'd probably end up joyriding, stealing someone's car, and then writing it off. And I thought, look, if I do this, we'll probably get caught, and I will go down and I'll go back in. But they won't. They get a slap on the wrist because they don't have a criminal record. So I was able to say, no, I'm not going. And he felt really like sort of proud in himself. Sort of, I was able to, you know, overcome the peer pressure. And she said to him, that's wonderful that you're able to do that. But she came with the but. What I would have loved to have heard from you is that the reason you didn't go out there with them because you empathized with the people's car you would have taken and what sort of, you know, how you would have put them out. And he looked her in the eye and he says, "I'm not there yet." And she said, "I realized the mistake." And I love that example because it's like we all know what the ideal is.
Yeah.
But there's stages to get there, and we can't transcend these stages. We have to move through all of them.
Yes.
And you have to acknowledge where you're at. And that's what's so wonderful about this young man. He was like, "Yeah, I get you, but I'm not there." And I think in our religious community, we're expecting people to be someplace when they've got to go through a number of levels to get there, and we've got to sort of rejoice with them in any stage. And so his was a sort of nafsi stage. It was like, I'm doing this for me. I don't want to get into trouble. But it's a progression from where he was at. And that is a moving through the stages still. And so acknowledge where people are at, and you know, and celebrate with them that, but know that there are things to move towards, and that's the wonderful thing about our faith, is that we have reference points that we all know what we should be doing, generally. And that's what's wonderful, that we have that reference point, but we have to acknowledge where we're at in relationship to that ideal, and we'll always be moving towards it. We will never get there fully. It's always something we're going to move off from and move back into. Like you were saying, in terms of you're feeling balanced to something, and you're going to move out, and it's just recognizing I'm out of balance here. Okay, how do I move back into balance?
Beautiful, exactly. And it's not about shame. It's not about comparison. It's not about judgment. It's not about a ruling about the nature of who you are essentially. We are all in progress, and if
mm,
that becomes the spirit of our culture,
mm,
you'll find everyone just developing and growing and
mm,
learning
mm,
naturally, because it's the natural. You give a flower. And I use this kind of metaphor often. That maybe I used it last time as well. But if a flower is wilting, you don't sit there and like, shame on you, you're a bad flower. I should have get another flower from
mm,
the nursery. Shame on you. You're so
mm,
ugly and underdeveloped. Look how weak you are and wilting and there's no fragrance coming out of you. No, it's like, make sure that the soil is nutrient dense. It has the trace minerals that it needs, the magnesium and the boron. Make sure it's getting good sunlight and
mm.
being able to has water, and create the conditions around it.
Yeah. And
And it won't.
you will forget to water it sometimes, but you know,
So
when it starts wilting, pick up on that it's wilting and start
that's
working.
yeah, exactly. You see the symptom, and read the symptom as a beckon for support, not as license for you to shame it or to
Yeah,
break it down.
yeah,
It's, it's saying, I need some support here. If you're reading this, help me, SOS.
mm,
And then you go create the conditions around it, or talk to it, or speak, whatever it is. And then the plant won't have there's no other option but to grow
yeah,
when the conditions are right. Same with children, same with us.
yeah. I love that analogy because
Yeah.
that's what I often refer to is that you walk into that, like my wife likes lilies, and so the lilies you want them to open so you get the fragrance, but so you go into the room and they're slightly open, but you can't go and force them open. You put the water in, you create the environment, but in the end that's going to open when it's ready to open.
That's it.
And you're not in
That's the
control of
goal.
that. You're not in control of that.
Yeah,
You're in control of trying to create a healthy environment for it. But essentially, that's going to open when it feels ready to open.
exactly. Yeah, not trying to control things. Allah Ta'ala is the controller of things.
Mm,
He's the controller of affairs. Part of narcissism, part of the trust style in NARM, for example,
mm,
is controlling, not trusting the environment, so I have to control it. It's
mm,
unsafe. Out there is unsafe. This is the opposite of for those maybe of my patients or my friends, students that are aware of, I talk about these different styles. The trust style doesn't trust anybody, they trust themselves. And so they try to control people. And that's kind of the narcissist setup. The autonomy style doesn't trust themselves, they trust everybody else. And so they defer to everybody. So they don't
mm,
say no, they don't put boundaries, they don't want to be shamed, they don't want to be the bad person, they want to be the good boy
mm,
or the good girl. And so they're empty, everyone's full around them, even though intellectually, that can't be the case. That's not the case. I know that's not the case. But emotionally, that is the case for them. And so we have to move out of this, projection, whether it's of everyone's better than me and I'm garbage,
mm,
or everyone's garbage and I'm the best and I'm going to try to control, or however they blend it. And there's a huge spectrum of possibility between those two and beyond. Now we want to be able just to allow for a little bit of nuance, enough to understand how these things grow, how these things develop, and how we can begin to nurture towards balance.
mm,
Now, when you were talking about child raising and education and the ulama class, if you will, I read something where Imam al-Ghazali said that it was necessary for the teacher to know the four temperaments
mm,
for teaching, because if you don't, that teacher is going to shame a child for maybe learning. The choleric learns very quick.
mm,
There are summer, hot and dry, bile. It's very active, very alpha, very aggressive, and so they're quick. They learn quick, but they move on quickly, so they don't root properly, and that's kind of their struggle. It's a
mm,
gift and a challenge. Whereas the phlegmatic, which is water, which is cold and wet, they're slower. They're
mm.
not lame, they're not stupid, they're just slower. Their nature is kind of more slow. But when they learn, they got it.
They want to embody. They embody it then, don't
They
they?
embody it
Yeah.
fully. And Sheikh Hamza Yusuf was commenting on that. He said the phlegmatic scholars are the best scholars,
Mm,
but they take time. The
mm,
choleric seems more, it seems more, exciting and more, popping here, popping there, and that's kind of their nature, and it can be exciting, but their
mm,
knowledge can be not as deep
mm,
as a phlegmatic. For example, so when you see a student who's not as excited, not as engaged, whatever, do you shame that child, or do you try to understand the nature of the child and help optimize that
mm.
process of their growth and development and education? The latter, of course.
Mm.
You know, and that needs to be the case for all the teachers. And we're all teachers in some way. We have, as parents, as, you know, we're people of the community, whatever. We're all
Mm.
engaged with people in relationship,
Mm.
and that's the paradigm.
Mm.
And that's why, you know, that it doesn't have to be the 4 temperaments. You can learn the 5, you know, elements of Chinese medicine, or you can learn the 3 doshas of Ayurvedic medicine, or just
Mm.
the survival strategies through like the SE norm work and the different psychological systems. They all kind of, or the Enneagram. I love the Enneagram personally. I'm a fan of
Mm.
the Enneagram, the 9 types. And so any of these systems where you can really begin to not label, not box,
Mm.
but get a feeling for the pattern of people, for
Mm.
the energy of people,
Mm.
then, you know, and then from there, then you can begin to understand them and relate to them, and that's a beautiful thing,
Mm.
as opposed to projecting and expecting and shaming and judging and
Mm.
separation, you know, more further separation and otherization.
Mm.
This is, there's a lot of that out there now. We don't need more of that.
Mm. I agree.
I'm doing that. So I think that's a good place to end for today. Do we have any exercises, CD, that you would recommend for people to explore any of these themes? Agency, so embodiment, you know, more of their self-discovery.
Yeah, I mean, one thing in terms of agency, um, what's important is just getting a sense of your own midline in relationship to. Um, so like when whilst you and me are speaking, um, consciously like being with the person, feeling what they're feeling, like your sense of them as they're speaking. And
Mm,
then as they're speaking, or even you're speaking, can you then shift your focus to your internal experience? So
beautiful.
what's going on for me as Mazin's speaking, I'm feeling a relaxation in my chest. Oh, he's put me on this. He's asked me a question now. I'm feeling a bit of a raising in my. Okay, give yourself a moment just to feel your sense of self. Rather, I've got to
Mm,
answer this straight away. Um, just feeling your sense of self before engaging, and feeling that sense of your shift of focus outside of yourself and inside of yourself.
I love that. Beautiful.
Mm.
I am familiar with something very similar called the 50-50. Was that what you heard?
No, what's
Where you got
this?
that from? So Brad Kammer, shout out to Brad Kammer, he's our NARM trainer. He's a friend of mine.
Mm.
And one of the first module, he taught something so similar to that.
Mm.
Where he said, basically, I'll just kind of give another angle to it, but I
Mm.
love that very much. You try to feel 100% your state. So go through kind of your thoughts, your feelings, physical sensations, your emotions, anything that's showing up in the horizon of your consciousness
Mm.
right now. In practice, this is a practice, so you don't
Mm.
have to worry. You know, you're not doing it right, and
Mm.
there's no doing it right. You just practice it. But then, as you kind of deepen that, you go into 100% of that. Just me. What's going on within me right now?
Mm.
And then you can begin to shift. What's going on around me? So look at, you know, smells, sense. What are you hearing? What are you seeing? Objects, things walking by, floating by, whatever is the case, the temperature, or whatever. What's happening around me, and go 100% into awareness of the surroundings.
Mm.
And then he calls it 50-50, where you're able to kind of hold a sense of yourself
Mm.
while also holding 50% of consciousness around.
Yeah.
You can kind of begin to blend. You know, when you're in a relationship, when you're by yourself, you don't have to be necessarily in a
Mm.
relationship. Just be 100% in you. And
Mm.
then someone comes in and says, "Assalamu alaikum, do you have a moment?" Yeah, now we can have 50-50. I can
Mm.
feel, maybe I can go 70-30. I can kind of really try to feel what they're going through, come back to 50. How's that land with me? Relate and
Yeah.
discuss, share, whatever. And in that, it's a wonderful practice. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to, I'm just curious where you got that
Yeah.
from. But
Yeah. And to add to that also, upon that is that try practicing even expressing how you receive things from others. And what's coming up for you in a very in a very sort of a simple way. So you say, Mazin, as you shared that, I feel really intrigued. So there's a sense of you in relationship to what that person is offering. And so, and how is it for you, Mazin, when you hear that from me? So there's this interchange, the reciprocity. So even in your words uttering, as you say that, this comes up for me. I'm wondering what it's like for you to hear that. You know, practicing these, sometimes obviously it's not always appropriate, but when it feels appropriate, practicing that sort of back and forthness where there's you being able to feel your sense of self and then also allowing the other person to experience themselves, and you have this lovely flow between. So what it's like to experience flow in the relationship, rather for me being for them, being there for them completely, or them being there for me completely, you know.
Yes, exactly. It's about the
Mm,
relationship.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much,
No
Idris.
problem. No problem, Mamas. It's been a
Join
pleasure.
us next time, inshallah ta'ala, for episode 3, where we hope to continue these reflections and conversations on trauma, healing, somatic work, and Islam spirituality, inshallah ta'ala. Till
Inshallah.
next time. Assalamu
Inshallah.
alaikum.
Salam, guys.